Hey, what can I say about Paul Bluestein, except that he's remarkable in every way. His writing is spectacular. His poetry is almost second to none. And anybody who doesn't buy the book is really doing themselves a disservice. So I am hopeful that after hearing some of his wonderful words and his scintillating personality, you'll all rush out to the bookstore. His books are available through libraries, and they're through major retail bookstores and a lot of local bookstores. And if you go in and it's not there, you can order it. They can order it through iPage. So the book is available and just waiting to get into your hot little hands. Anyhow, here's Paul.
Thank you, Candace. That was wonderful. My mother would be so proud. Before I begin, I want to thank Carol Johnson for organizing this. Thank you. I want to thank Candace for publishing and editing not only my first collection of poetry, Time Passages, but the second collection, Fade to Black. Candace suffered through endless changes in the poems that I wanted to make, made editing suggestions, some of which I took, that made the poetry much better, and painted the paintings that became the covers. I want to thank all of you who joined me for this. I didn't write the poetry just to be read in my basement. If I couldn't share these poems, all of which are a piece of my life, if I couldn't share those pieces of my life with people, including my friends, my family, and others, then they don't have much meaning. And of course, there's my wife, Linda, who I've asked to read my poetry because she's so much better a reader than I am. I read my own poetry in what I think of as the poet's voice, meaning a deadly monotone where poems go to die. Linda was the inspiration for many of the poems in these two volumes. And without her, there may have been things to write about, but I don't think I would have noticed any of them. So I learned, the way this began was I learned how to play guitar when I was 16. And shortly after that, I started to write songs, mostly because I couldn't remember the lyrics that other people had written. And wrote songs for decades, but found eventually that there were things that I wanted to say that wouldn't fit neatly into two rhymed verses and a chorus. And those became poems. Many of the poems, most are drawn straight out of experiences in my own life. And I wanted to paint these experiences as pictures so that the reader could see what I had seen and maybe feel what I had felt. Sometimes the experiences didn't stay with me and they didn't become poems. But sometimes after I saw something, heard something, felt something, the poetry telephone started to ring, and it kept ringing until I answered it, even if I didn't want to talk to anybody just then. So the first four poems, which come from the newer collection, Fade to Black, like that. There's nothing mysterious about them, no academic references, no hidden meanings. They are pictures. So I'm going to ask Linda to read these four, which are things that I've seen and felt.
Hilltop Cemetery. Come midday, we set out for Hilltop, the Shannon family cemetery in the middle of nowhere, South Texas, near Tilden. Tea, whose given name was Louis, but everyone called him by his middle initial, sat in the front seat between his children. Cousin Pat followed in the Chevy S10. The bed of his pickup, most often loaded with feed or fencing or blowtorches for burning pear, today only carried shovels. Walking to the place where, earlier in the day, a hole had been dug, we could read names and dates on graves of generations past. Children who died from diphtheria, women who died in childbirth or from the Spanish flu, men who died in war. T's son placed his father's ashes in the ground, and we stood holding hands in the caliche dust and heat, spoke remembrances, and recited prayers. Afterward, we took up the shovels, mended the wounded earth, and said goodbye, having sent T home. No preacher, no choir, just relatives, some friends, and the live oaks to watch over him. Three days of hope. In the gray morning, the ragged line forms outside the door. People wait while rain runs off their shoulders and shoes. Inside, volunteers count cans of tuna and loaves of bread. There are bags of rice, peanut butter, jars of jam, food and hope doled out in 3-day parcels. The best we can do, even while we know it's not enough. Still, we listen to funny, sad stories ask about children or parents, and carry bags to cars that are sometimes also homes. When, finally, we have nothing left to give, we close the doors. And surrounded by empty shelves, we realize again how close we are to asking if we can please have one more box of cereal.
Linda and I worked for several years at a food pantry in Bridgeport, where people would come and get food because they had no money and nothing to eat.
And SNAP benefits had run out, and we gave them 3 days just to make ends meet. Okay. Ungewünscht.
Oh, this was a trip that we took to Prague, Czechoslovakia.
The dusty synagogue window looked out on the narrow Austrian street below, Unterburgstrasse, where it began. What the world called Kristallnacht, the Jews called the beginning of the end. The photograph on the wall behind a battered frame and glass cracked and dirty like the window was that of the same street in November 1938. Chained at both ends, crowded with people beneath a banner that stretched from one side of the street to the other, from one side of Europe to the other. A banner that read, Juden ungewünscht, Jews unwelcome. On the walls of the house, I read the inscribed names of the dead and, looking again at the photograph, wondered if I was seeing the past or perhaps some lurking tomorrow.
I started that after the trip that we took, which was 10 or 11 years ago, and didn't know how to end it until I started to worry about America. And only finished it a couple of years ago because I didn't know how it was going to end. Still don't.
Subway Benediction. Running for the subway shuttle from Grand Central to Broadway, I heard music drifting through an open door. I swung into the car, and there he was, long-haired, bearded, standing in the aisle with his mismatched socks on display, singing somewhere over the rainbow in a voice so open and sunlit that I forgot I was underground. Even the wheels squealing as the train rocked along the tracks could not pull me out of the song, spinning through the crowded car like a spider's web, holding us fast. A hat on the floor in front of him held some silver and paper, and I added my thanks. As I left the train and headed for the exit, I could still hear him singing to the empty car, words that poured out into the station and were reflected by white tile walls, spattering us all with red and violet and green.
So I like those because, you know, I was taught to, in school, particularly in high school, to hate poetry. And it took me a very long time to like it, about 50 years. And I hated it because it was always about the technical parts of it. What was the meter? What was the rhyme? You know, what was the hidden meaning? These poems have no hidden meaning. They are just stories that happened to me, but that seemed over time to become bigger in their meaning than when I originally thought about them. Sometimes I write about things, people that I know, and places that I live as metaphor. I didn't start by writing metaphor, but soon found that it was a wonderful way for me to express something that I wanted to say, but didn't want to say it in plain English. I wanted to compare it to something. You'll notice, incidentally, that these poems are all short. I'm a hit and run writer. I am. If it's more than a page, I can't manage to get past a page. One of the people who's joined us, Ron Blumenfeld, just published his first novel, which is wonderful. It's called The King's Anatomist. And if you have a chance to buy it and read it, you should. For me, the amazing part is I have no idea how he wrote a novel. I've thought about trying to do that, and I know that I can't. A page is about what I can do. So, you know, these are little poems, but I hope that I've polished them enough so that they have a little shine. The next three are from my first collection, which is Time Passages, and they are, in fact, metaphors, and you'll understand them, I think, pretty clearly.
Hard place. My home is a hard place, with towns that come honestly by their names. Rocky Neck, Stonington, Black Rock. The hard rain of a nor'easter and the hard freeze of winter suits people whose grandfathers built walls from the rock that grew in every field and hillside. Hard people whose faces and lives are carved by the chisel of steady habits. But when May comes and the memory of March is gone, hearts hardened by the granite gray winter surrender to the sun. Moving day. I remember this one. The 18-wheeler, bright as a Barnum and Bailey trailer, arrives in the gray morning mist of a cold January Monday. The house is as empty as we feel, nothing remaining except nail holes, a notebook, and ghosts lingering in the corners. The flexible flyers that children and grandchildren rode down white winter hills, rolling off to make snow angels at the bottom, are left to sleep in the attic, but the snow angels come with us. The piano has gone, but not the music we remember. Chairs and china, tables and lamps, bookshelves and beds will find their ways to other homes and other lives. But our memories, light as thought, packaged into a small space as a heart, are carried place to place on our intertwined hands. This is moving day, the first day of the last of our lives. Waltz time.
This is the first poem I ever wrote.
The afternoon beach is not deserted. That solitude the gulls and the waves will not find for another month or so. Small children sit on lifeguard stands while mothers squint into the setting sun, pretending it's still July. As I walk, I count my steps. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Strides in the 3/4 rhythm of the R months that have just begun. September, October, November. I walk past horseshoe crabs imprisoned by circles in the sand, drawn by innocent hands that don't yet know sand circles are nearly at an end. As I reach the rise of the jetty and turn to see the sweep of sand and sea and setting sun, running children turn their backs on chasing waves as surely as the calendar pages have turned their back on summer, abandoning August for the rhythm of autumn. Soon we will dance to the waltz of falling leaves, slowing, slowing, until we come to the frozen measures of winter.
Finally, there are 3 poems from Fade to Black, the second of the collections, that are about someone I have known. You may recognize the person, or you may not, but it's trying to capture the spirit of someone that I've come to know well and care a lot about.
Nothing's lost. Her hands hold the guitar tentatively, like a new mother, while her fingers struggle with half-remembered folk songs first learned 50 years ago during her sexual revolution, during her war for independence. These are hands that moved on from bar chords to carry signs at sit-ins, wore a wedding ring, wrote a thesis, raised children and a husband. Hands that tried to hold tight to a life that was snatched away while she was busy helping with homework and making ends meet when there was more month at the end of the money. Now, as she picks at the strings, the guitar begins to sing again, to find its long, stilled voice, and slowly it all comes back to her. Black walnut. Modesty fits you like a poorly made dress, loose and shapeless, hiding the person underneath. You don't have to bend down or lie down for anybody. It's an insult to the God who made you a tree to go around tangled and tight like a barberry bush. Stand up tall and strong, dangerous as a black walnut. Stretch out your arms to hold up the sky and feel the core of the world beneath your feet. Live in the sunlight, and if anyone tries to throw shade at you, stick a branch in their eye and call it just. Taking your place in the world is no sin. Post-it. The cheat sheet in the palm of my 8th grade hand, reminding me that the Battle of Hastings was fought in 1066, has been replaced 66 years later by a post-it note on the bathroom mirror that simply reads, "Take your pills. There's cinnamon toast and coffee in the kitchen. I love you." She puts it there every morning to remind me the battle isn't over yet.
And The last poem is the answer to the question that I've asked myself many times, which is, why do I write these things? This is the creative process, my attempt to explain it.
This one is titled Writing Dance. Dance is a big theme. You ought to do that more.
Yes.
Okay. Drops of blue-black ink, like rain from some alien sky, fall from my pen onto sheets of snow-white paper. Letters, words, sentences bloom there, as if they were flowers in spring. Ideas, drawn in lines and loops, commas and quotation marks, a minuet of mind and hand which has been danced for 10,000 years. We write for the same reason we sing, to testify that we reached for heaven, and though we could not catch hold of the wings of angels, we managed to pluck a feather as they passed.
Time passages and fade to black.